when God stops him, stays his hand. And this is what we read in Genesis 22. He said, an angel said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. And he said, do not stretch out your hand against the lad. Do nothing to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. So that verse, Genesis 22:12, is a very poignant example for open theists of God learning something new that he didn't know before in light of what Abraham did. He didn't know what Abraham would do until he did it. For now I know. I didn't know before. Here is what John Sanders says about that text. I have the quote for you in your handout. God needs to know if Abraham is the sort of person on whom God can count for collaboration toward the fulfillment of the divine project. Will he be faithful? Or must God find someone else through whom to achieve his purpose? Now, by the way, this is not my main point, but just realize some of the spin-off implications if you hold this openness view. I mean, look at that last question that Sanders says. Will he be faithful, or must God find someone else through whom to achieve his purpose? Someone else? So did he give to Abraham in Genesis 12 and Genesis 15 and Genesis 17? Did he make a covenant with Abraham that said, Abraham, as long as you're faithful to me, I will bless you, and I will make of you a great nation, and through you I will bless the nations. But it depends upon you being faithful to me. Is that the way it is worded in Genesis 12, Genesis 15, Genesis 17? It isn't. It's just Abraham. I will bless you. I will curse those who curse you. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless the nations through you. It is unconditional. But you realize, God has bound himself to this man, to Abraham. He can't go and find somebody else through whom to achieve his purpose without going back on what he has said. He can't do that. So, I mean, you just realize, boy, Sanders is just not thinking carefully about this text when he says things like that. But this is what Sanders proposes. So God needs to know if he's going to be faithful. If he's not going to be faithful, I'm going elsewhere, says God. Okay, well, let me respond to this idea in several ways. Number one, Abraham's fear of God and Romans 4 and Hebrews 11. Boy, notice what the angel says to Abraham when he has the knife raised. He's about to plunge it into his son. And the angel stops him and he says, don't kill your son, for now I know what? That you fear God. For now I know that you fear God. Okay, so if you're going to take the language seriously, here is what God learned for the first time that he didn't know before. What's that? That Abraham feared God. Now here's my question to you. Is that reasonable to conclude that for the first time, never before did God know this, God learned right now that Abraham was God-fearing? Well, the problem with that is Abraham's life of obedience and trusting God previously has already demonstrated significant fear of God. I mean, God-fearing is a resolute determination to do what God says. To trust God no matter what. That's what fear of God is. Had not Abraham already exhibited that over and over in his life? I mean, think for example, Genesis 15:6, the famous passage where God said to him, he declared him righteous. Abraham believed, and God credited to him as righteousness. What did he believe? God showed him the starry heavens, and he said, look at them, so shall your descendants be. Abraham believed, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. Isn't that an act of God-fearing. Indeed, that's in Romans 4, that account. Now you go on in Romans 4, and then is the account where God promises to Abraham and Sarah. He is 100 years old. She is 90 years old. She has been barren as a woman her entire life. She has never been able to conceive a child. And now she probably has gone through menopause at 90 years old. The deadness of Sarah's womb is mentioned in Romans chapter 4. Abraham is 100 years old. She's 90 years old. And yet God says, through you will have a son, Isaac, who will be the son of promise. And in Romans 4 we read this: without becoming weak in faith, Abraham contemplated the deadness of his own body and the deadness of Sarah's womb. Yet without becoming weak in faith, he contemplated this, but he grew strong in faith, believing that what God had promised, he was able also to do. So it was reckoned to him as righteousness. He refers to Genesis 15:6 again in this. So here's my question to you. Isn't that remarkable faith, despite enormous empirical evidence to the contrary? I mean, overwhelming empirical evidence to the contrary. Yet Abraham believed because God promised he's going to do it. Hebrews 11, likewise. Hebrews 11 speaks of the sacrifice of Isaac, step of faith from Abraham. And you know what it says in Hebrews 11? Let me look at this if you don't mind turning in your Bibles. This is fascinating. Verse 17, by faith Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. And he who had received the promises was offering up his only son. So here is this son of promise that Abraham was now giving up. It was he to whom it was said, in Isaac your descendants shall be called. Notice again, there was no qualification given here that if things don't work out with Isaac, we'll go with somebody else. I mean, just as God called Abraham, and it must be Abraham. And he said Isaac, and it must be Isaac. And Abraham knew that. So what do we read? Verse 19. Abraham considered that God is able to raise people even from the dead, from which he also received him back as a type. So guess what Hebrews indicates Abraham was thinking in his mind as he ascended Mount Moriah, fully intending to do what God commanded, namely, kill his son there. What was he thinking? After I kill him, and I will, because God commanded me to, what will God do? He will raise Isaac from the dead, because God has promised he, Isaac, will be the son of promise. And God cannot go back on his word. Okay, now let me ask you something. Does that sound like God learns now for the first time, for now I know that you fear me? Are you kidding? It cannot mean that. So my point is, the open theists focus on, for now I know. And I want to say, let's focus on the whole phrase and see what it says about what God supposedly learns for the first time. For now I know that you fear me cannot mean he learns for the first time something he never knew before. It cannot mean that. Here's a second point. I'm building my case here. Second point, transient nature of God's test of Abraham. You know, if Abraham has libertarian freedom, which open theists would believe, would hold, if Abraham has libertarian freedom, what good would it do to find out today that Abraham would be faithful if tomorrow, given another test, he has libertarian freedom and he can do otherwise? There is no guarantee because of libertarian freedom that we will ever do anything that God might want us to do. Because in every situation, for every choice we make, if we have the power of contrary choice, everything being just what it is, we can do A or not A or B, then there is no way God could know from what we choose today that that has any indication about what we might do tomorrow. So much for the test that would help God know what Sanders says here. God needs to know if Abraham will be faithful or if he needs to find somebody else to fulfill his project. He could not learn that through this. Third point, small letter C, the parallel language of Genesis 18, verses 16 to 21. If you have Bibles, turn back there, just a few chapters in Genesis 18. Here Abraham meets some three men who come and visit him. One of them is likely a Christophany. That is an appearance of Christ, because only two of them then go on down in chapter 19 to Sodom and Gomorrah and bring destruction upon the cities there. But three of them come and visit Abraham. And let me pick up at verse 16 is fine. Verse 16, the men arose from there and looked down towards Sodom, and Abraham was walking among them to send them off. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Notice it's the Lord said. So this is God speaking through one of these three men. So likely a Christophany or a theophany, but probably a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ. Let's see. Since Abraham will surely become a great and mighty nation, and in him all the nations of the earth will be blessed. For I have chosen him so that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring upon Abraham what he has spoken about him. And the Lord said, now look at this, this is the Lord, verse 20. The Lord said, the outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is indeed great. Their sin is exceedingly grave. I will go down now. Go where? To Sodom and Gomorrah. I'm not there now, but I'll go down there. I will go down there and see if they have done entirely according to its outcry, which has come to me. And if not, I will know. So here is another example of the same kind of language. I don't know what's going on now. I'll go there and find out if the outcry that I've heard is true. When I get there, then I'll know. Well, goodness, if you apply an openness hermeneutic, an openness way of interpreting Scripture to this passage, what would you conclude about God? Well, he doesn't know. Not only does he not know the future, he doesn't know for sure the present reality in Sodom until he gets there. So he doesn't have exhaustive present knowledge. He doesn't know if what he heard in the past is true. He doesn't have exhaustive knowledge of the past, and he has to go there to find out. So he is not omnipresent. He is not everywhere present. He has to go there to find out what's going to be the case. So goodness, just taking that hermeneutical approach that open theists encourage us to do and apply it to this passage, you have to deny of God exhaustive knowledge of the past, exhaustive knowledge of the present, and omnipresence. Unbelievable. You know, I'm waiting for the next generation of open theists to propose in regard to Genesis 9, I think it is, where God put the rainbow in the sky. And you remember what the text says? He put the rainbow in the sky so that when Noah saw it, Noah would remember that God promised never to flood the earth again. Is that what it says? It says so that when God sees the rainbow in the sky, God will remember that he promised never to flood the world again. That's what it says. I can't wait for the openness person to come along and say, you know what? It's like a string on his finger, you know. God has a bad memory. He just doesn't remember everything. And so, well, you know, oh yeah, that rainbow, oh, that's right, I got to remember the covenant. You know, I'm not going to flood the world again.